They wake you before the bells ring, before the coals catch flame in the hearth, before the world remembers that you're just a girl, not a bride, not yet. Your maid whispers that it's time, but she doesn't meet your eyes. She never does. You rise from your straw mattress, feet numb from the cold stone beneath. Outside the shutters, frost clings to the glass like a second skin. Inside, the fire's gone out. Today is your wedding day. They sit you on the stool by the window, the one with the cracked leg and the water stain that never fades. The mirror is already propped before you. Not polished glass, not silvered like the ones queens have. Just hammered tin, warped and wavy, reflecting back something vaguely like a face. You. Your mother enters. She doesn't smile. She carries a bowl of white paste and a comb made from boiled bone. Your maid holds a needle over a candle flame until the tip blackens, then blows it out and dips it into crushed charcoal. It smells like iron and ash. They begin with the eyes. The coal is meant to protect against evil spirits, but it stings, sharp, searing, like soot dragged across skin. Your lashes twitch as the needle passes close. Hold still, your mother says, not unkindly. You try. Next comes the face. The white paste is made from ground vinegar, flour, and something you weren't told. It's meant to bleach, to cleanse, to make your skin pale like noble women's portraits, like saints in the chapel murals. It burns immediately. Your cheeks flush beneath the mask, but that's not the kind of colour they want. Redness is common, peasant, dirty. They want bone. They want porcelain. They want snow. Your hairline is too low, they say. You bite your lip as your maid takes the string and begins plucking, one hair at a time, from your brow, your temples, your forehead. Your scalp tightens with each rip. When she's done, your forehead shines like polished wood. Your tears have dried into salt. Through the door, you hear the bustle of the courtyard. Men shouting, pigs squealing, a donkey brays. The village butcher is already sharpening his blade. Today, there will be meat. Today, there will be celebration. They'll lift you onto the cart wrapped in wool and paint and drive you toward the man who bartered 2 goats for your future. But not yet. There's one last thing. Your mother holds a cloth soaked in something that smells like vinegar and rot. She dabs it beneath your arms, across your chest, and between your thighs. It's meant to mask odour. Not that anyone will ask if you smell like rosemary. They only want you clean. Not clean like pure. Clean like butchered. The maid reaches for the final touch. A circle of red powder made from dried beetles and mixed with tallow. She smears it on your lips until they glow like meat. Not to kiss, not to speak, just to be seen. You look at yourself in the mirror. Your face is not your own. It is someone else's idea of beauty. A ghost's idea. A man's. You're not sure. You try to smile, your lips crack. This is not vanity, this is survival. If you find yourself drawn into the strange beauty rituals of the past, thank you for being here. It means a lot to know that across centuries and continents, people are still asking the same questions. What did it cost to be seen? What did it mean to be beautiful? If you'd like to explore more stories like this, feel free to subscribe or leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. It's strange and wonderful to know we're connected by this curiosity across time. They never called it religion. Not openly. Not in church, not during Mass. But you knew. Every woman did. The rules of beauty were not written in scripture, but they might as well have been, because they governed your soul just the same. A woman's face was not hers. It was a canvas, a warning, a prophecy. If you were beautiful, they said it meant God had smiled on your birth. A sign of virtue, grace, favour, but too much beauty. That meant temptation, seduction, sorcery. If your features were plain, they called you unfortunate. If they were misshapen, they called you cursed. If your skin bore pox scars or blemishes, they whispered. And if your cheekbones rose too high, or your eyes tilted the wrong way, they didn't whisper at all. They pointed. Beauty was not personal. It was public property. What you looked like could invite mercy or bring death. A fair face might earn a noble match. A crooked one might get you accused of summoning storms. Girls learned this before they could bleed. They heard it in the marketplace. She's got the look of a midwife's sin. That one's too pale. Death follows those girls. Did you see her hair? That's no Christian colour. In villages where mirrors were rare, a woman's worth was measured by second-hand glances, by how many men looked at her, and how many women looked away, and the church didn't stop them. The priests preached humility, modesty, simplicity, but they never questioned why men's robes were long and plain, while women were expected to twist, pluck, bleach and bind. Clergymen stood behind pulpits and read from the book of Sirach. A woman's beauty makes her husband's face shine, but excessive adornment is vanity and sin. They said vanity was a female illness, that a woman who wore pigment was closer to Jezebel than to Mary. But then they praised the noble ladies whose portraits hung in the halls, painted white as clouds, cheeks blooming red as martyrdom. They scorned ugliness as proof of moral failing, and punished beauty as a sign of temptation. There was no winning. The nun with the disfigured jaw was shunned in silence. The widow with golden curls was pelted with stones. Both were guilty, one for reminding them of death, the other for reminding them of desire. Even saints weren't safe. Legend said St. Agnes was so beautiful that the Roman prefect tried to defile her, and when she refused, he burned her alive. But not before the crowd stripped her to the waist and mocked the body God gave her. Her relics are kept in a golden box, her beauty in memory. The religion of the face had no church, but it had rituals: bleaching, blistering, plucking, masking. Each act was a litany, a penance, each wound a hymn. You bled for beauty because to be plain was dangerous, and to be radiant was worse. It wasn't about looking good, it was about looking safe. A face that pleased men but not too much, that reassured women but didn't compete. That told the priest, I am humble. That told the husband, I am yours. That told the midwife, I am not a witch. That told the mirror, I know my place. And every woman learned to pray without words, by powdering her jaw until it looked meek, by dragging colour across her cheeks until it screamed of innocence, by hiding herself in visibility. Every detail controlled, sculpted, corrected. Because beauty was not praise, it was a performance, and to forget your lines was heresy. They told you your skin should look like milk, not the milk that's fresh and warm from the goat's teat, number the kind that's gone still, cold, pale, separated from life. They said that was noble. A lady's complexion should be untouched by sun, because sun meant labour. Labour meant soil. Soil meant peasantry. And beauty could not come from the earth. It had to float above it. So they taught you how to burn yourself white, not with flame, with powder. White lead mixed with vinegar. Egg whites whipped into a froth and left to dry like a mask across your face. Mercury applied with a feather, thin as breath, but lethal as judgment. It tingled first, then it itched, then it cracked. They said that meant it was working. If your skin blistered, they said you used too much. If it didn't, they said you weren't trying hard enough. Some girls stopped blinking because the mixture pulled their cheeks so tight they couldn't move their faces without tearing. Some woke to find pieces of their skin on the pillow, but they smiled through the sores. Because when men complimented them, you look like porcelain, they heard. You look like property. Then came the hair. Gold was the standard. Always gold. Not the burnished chestnut of northern girls or the raven silk of the east. Only the pale, honey-threaded kind painted onto saints and queens. And if you weren't born with it, you had to make it. They'd mix lye with ashes or steep chamomile in stale urine, soak the hair until it reeked, sit you in the sun for hours wrapped in cloth, sweating into the stink of transformation. Your scalp would tingle, then blister, then flake. But when the cloth unwrapped and your hair glinted, even a little, they'd cheer. They said that meant you were blessed. But if your hair was too dark, if it stayed stubborn, curling and thick, refusing to shine like flax, they shaved it. Some girls hid beneath veils. Some drew golden threads into wigs and pinned them with hope. But everyone knew what a shaved head meant. It meant you failed to look like a virgin. It meant you were punished. And then there were the brows. A wide open forehead was the sign of intelligence, purity, restraint. So your hairline had to recede. They used tweezers carved from bone or metal hooks, and sometimes strips of cloth soaked in beeswax and yanked without warning. If that wasn't enough, they'd take razors, shave the top of your head until it bled, then press cloth to it, whispering prayers that the scar would not thicken too much, because scars meant sin. But so did shadows. So you painted shadows on purpose. Lines were drawn beneath the jaw to make it sharper. Blue was painted over the skin to mimic delicate veins. Crimson powder, made from crushed insects, was applied to the lips, not for kissing, just to show blood without breaking skin. The result? A woman who looked like a statue or a corpse. And that was the goal, because if you looked too alive, too flushed, too real, too healthy, they said you were vulgar. Beauty was not about looking well. It was about looking expensive, unreachable, fragile, distant, holy, like snow that hadn't been touched, like gold that hadn't been mined, like a body already half claimed by death. Because in the medieval world, the most beautiful woman was the one who looked like she'd never bled, and might never live long enough to try. They didn't hide the knives. They laid them out on the table beside the combs and rouge like instruments in a sacred rite. Some dull, some rusted, some still stained from yesterday. Because in your world, beauty wasn't painted on. It was drawn out, cut loose from the flesh. It started small. A single leech placed beneath the chin, to drain the bad blood, to make the cheeks glow with purity, to refine the face into something ethereal. The sensation was strange, wet, sucking, alive. If you flinched, they told you to be grateful. It's working, they said. Ugly blood resists. Holy blood flows. Then came the cupping jars. Glass when available, horn when not. Heated with a flame and pressed against the back or thigh until your skin ballooned purple. When the swelling peaked, they'd slice it. Let it bleed. Let it breathe. Because the skin, they said, was a window, and beauty came from opening it. The most fashionable women wore their bruises like medals. A deep red circle below the collarbone was admired. Proof she had the means to be purified. That she bled on purpose, not from work or childbirth or punishment. Then there was scarification. Not the kind worn by warriors. This was more delicate, more intentional. Small incisions made in hidden places, the inside of the thigh, the soft of the belly, not to wound, to shape. Over time, the skin would harden into smooth raised lines, contours, shadows, quiet definition. They called it contouring before makeup existed. They called it refinement. You called it what it was, pain. Still, you sat still, because if you moved, the lines would go crooked, and crooked lines meant an ugly heart. There were women who went further, the noble-born, the royal, the desperate. They darkened their eyes permanently, not with soot or pigment, but with powdered iron, pressed under the lid with a stylus until the skin broke and the metal took root. It was called coal tattooing. It lasted for life, or what was left of it. In some courts, it was the mark of prestige. A woman with dark-lined eyes was thought to be pious, poised, and powerful. Even if she wept pus for weeks afterward, even if she lost the sight in one eye, because no one asked if she could see, only if she looked devout. Your lips weren't spared either. To keep them red, they'd prick them with thorns, with needles, with knives. Then rub in red ochre mixed with lamb fat to trap the colour inside. Smiling hurt, speaking bled. But that wasn't a problem. No one asked you to speak anyway. The belief was simple. Too much blood made you sick. Too little made you ugly. So women learned to bleed on command, to schedule their suffering, to monitor their hue by the mirror and the moon. The best among them could tell you what day to bleed to make their cheeks bloom by Sunday, what part of the body to cut to sharpen the jaw, which vein to open so the hand stayed soft but not swollen. Beauty wasn't a blessing, it was a regimen, a punishment turned into performance, a slow, precise ritual of pain. And the worst part? It worked. The girl who bled at dawn glowed by supper. The woman with red stung lips drew second glances. The bride with fresh scars down her sides was praised for her noble posture. Because she didn't flinch when she moved, because her stillness looked like grace. But no one saw the wounds beneath the bodice. No one noticed the limp hidden beneath layers of silk. No one counted the cloths buried in ash behind the kitchen hearth. The blood was always cleaned, but the memory stayed. Because once you learned that pain made you beautiful, it was hard to believe anything else ever could. They told you not to wash too often, not because there wasn't water, but because there was fear. Fear that a clean woman was a dangerous one. The church had its reasons. Bathing opened the pores, and open pores, they said, tempted the devil in. Steam made the flesh soft, and soft flesh, they said, stirred lust in the eyes of men and angels alike. So you bathed rarely, and even then, under supervision. A priest once warned that a naked woman in water is like bait on a hook, that the soul slips out with the steam, that vanity begins with the desire to feel clean. So women learned to live with the filth, but not with the shame of it, because the world still expected you to smell like roses. Without ever touching them, you masked it with what you could find. Sprigs of rosemary braided into your sleeves, lavender crushed into vinegar and dabbed behind the ears, cloves sewn into the hem of your dress, brushing against your ankles with each step. Not for freshness, for survival. Because a woman who smelled of sweat was accused of sloth, and a woman who smelled too sweet was accused of seduction. The balance was impossibly thin, and dangerously expensive. Perfume was a luxury, sold by apothecaries who whispered more than they spoke. Little vials of ambergris, whale bile dried in the sun until it reeked of musk and ocean rot. Oil of civet, scraped from the glands of wild cats and stirred with rose water, and musk from deer trapped in distant forests bled for scent. You couldn't afford it, but your mistress could. She dabbed it beneath her arms, on her inner wrists, across the bones of her chest. And still she asked every hour, "Do I stink?" Because no woman ever knew for sure, not when the standard changed with the wind. One day, the priest called perfume an abomination. The next, the bishop's niece wore it to mass. One day, your friend was praised for smelling like cinnamon. The next, she was accused of covering the stench of sin. Some women turned to more dangerous methods. They drank mint boiled in wine, hoping it would sweeten their breath. They rinsed their mouths with vinegar and iron filings to redden their gums, because pale teeth were thought to be signs of decay. They scrubbed their skin with alum and crushed shells until it shone raw. They perfumed their undergarments with camphor and cloves, risking infection. They used belladonna to scent their hair. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it blinded them, because the nose wasn't just for attraction, it was for judgment, and men judged with it like dogs. A whiff of onion or earth meant you were unfit for the hall. Too much lilac meant you were hiding something worse. Even childbirth had its own scent codes. New mothers were expected to smell of milk and iron, not rot, not blood, not afterbirth. So they stuffed themselves with herbs, laid garlic between their thighs, washed in wine, burned sage beneath their cradles. Some called it healing, some called it witchcraft, but no one called it what it was, desperation. Because your scent could betray you, could accuse you, could define you. In one village, they said a woman was hanged because her sweat smelled too sweet during Lent. In another, a midwife was stoned for wearing amber during a stillbirth. A noblewoman once had her servant whipped for carrying jasmine in her satchel, because it reminded the husband of someone he used to know. And still, every morning, you anointed yourself, a pinch of sage beneath the breasts, a smear of ash behind the ears, a prayer that the day's scent would be forgivable, because you weren't trying to smell good, you were trying not to smell wrong, and in the medieval world that difference could mean everything. The paints were kept in secret, wrapped in cloth, hidden beneath loose floorboards or inside hollowed prayer books, because to decorate your face was to declare something bold, and boldness was rarely safe for women. But colour had its own seduction. A flush of red on the cheeks meant vitality, a dark lash line meant mystery, a bitten lip hinted at desire. Even as priests denounced it, even as neighbours whispered, you still watched how the noble women's faces glowed beneath candlelight, and wondered if pain could ever look that beautiful. The truth was, it wasn't glow, it was poison. Most rouges were made with vermilion, a compound of mercury and sulphur ground to fine powder. It shimmered red like crushed rubies and clung to the skin like sin. Apply it too often and your cheeks blistered. Too little and you were called ill-tempered. White powder came from lead carbonate, sold in paper cones at the market, marked as Venetian ceruse. They said it came from Italy, but it often came from the apothecary's back room. It made the skin smooth, pale, noble, until it peeled, until it flaked, until it killed. Some women mixed ground pearl into their face cream if they could afford it. Others scraped chalk into goat fat and prayed it wouldn't crack before sundown. The lips were worse. For colour, they used cochineal, insects dried and crushed into scarlet dust, blended with pig lard or lanolin. It went on smooth, tasted like iron, stayed red even after tears, wine, or punishment. If the colour faded, they'd bite their own lips until the blood returned, because death was forgivable, drabness was not. Eyeliner too had its price. They mixed soot, ash and lead oxide to darken the lash line. Sometimes it was traced with a feather, other times a thin bone needle was pressed beneath the lashes, dipping pigment into the flesh. It wasn't about allure, it was about definition. A sharp face meant a sharp mind, they said, but only if the sharpness was quiet, never angry, never loud. Colour had rules. Too much rouge, and you were imitating a prostitute. Too much white, and you looked like a corpse. Not enough, and you were accused of sloth. Some towns banned women from wearing colour during Lent. Others demanded it for feast days. A bishop once ordered the execution of a woman whose painted face caused a knight to fall in love and break his vow. So women learned to hide their tools, to blend ash into flour, to keep rouge wrapped in muslin disguised as medicine. They passed recipes between each other like secrets, crushed beetles and vinegar for lip tint, sheep fat and ground bone for blush, burnt almond for the brows, ox gall to thin the paint, though it stung the eyes. Even noble women weren't immune. A queen once had her face painted fresh every 2 hours during court. She could afford it. She had servants. She also died with sores behind her ears where the powder had eaten through the skin. But beauty was worth that. Because when a woman entered the hall painted like that, with cheeks like roses, lashes like ink, and lips the colour of sin, she wasn't just being seen, she was being judged, ranked, measured, and if she passed, she might live another day. Colour wasn't decoration, it was survival. It allowed you to lie with your face, to look young when your body was failing, to look healthy when your lungs were full of rot, to look obedient when you were planning to run. And every morning, when you sat before the warped mirror, you asked not, who do I want to be today? But, what will they let me survive as today? Because in the medieval world, The right pigment could save your life, and the wrong one could damn your soul. There was no word for safety. Not if you were beautiful, not if you were plain, not if you were anything in between. Because in the medieval world, a woman's face wasn't hers. It was a confession, whether she wanted it to be or not. If you were beautiful, they said you were dangerous. If you were too beautiful, they said you were unnatural. If your beauty lingered past childbearing age, they said you were a sorceress. And if you knew how to make yourself beautiful, they said you were a witch. There are stories, quiet ones, of women burned not for poisoning husbands or cursing fields, but for carrying crushed herbs in their sleeves, for knowing which flowers to boil for clear skin, for braiding rosemary into their hair before Mass, for standing in the moonlight with a mirror, because vanity was the devil's favourite door, and a woman who admired her own reflection must have invited him in. In one village, a midwife was dragged from her home because she'd given a bride a blush made from beetroot and vinegar. The groom accused her of enchantment, said no woman could be that radiant without magic. She was drowned the next morning. The bride never wore colour again, but the laws weren't always written down. Most of the time they lived in the mouths of neighbours. A girl caught drawing coal around her eyes might find her name etched in the tavern wall, next to drawings of snakes. A widow who wore perfume to the market might return home to find her door marked in ash. A servant with red cheeks might be dismissed without reason. Too much attention, the lady would mutter. Because the line between beauty and whoredom was drawn by the insecure and enforced by the powerful, and the most powerful of all, the queens. They were held to standards higher than saints, expected to look celestial, but never seductive, immaculate, but not indulgent, timeless, but without effort. If a queen aged, they called her weak. If she looked too young, they called her false. If she wore colour, she was trying too hard. If she didn't, she was letting herself go. And behind her, in the shadows of the court, stood the mistress, younger, louder, painted in scandal, but always watching, always copying. They shared rouge pots, they shared lovers, they shared gossip whispered behind fans and veils, but only one of them would be remembered in the chronicles, and often it was the one who lost. Because to be beautiful and powerless was tragic, to be beautiful and clever was criminal. There are records of noble women put on trial for using enchantments to ensnare the heart of a lord. But the enchantments weren't curses. They were rouge, a necklace, a bath with rose oil, a slow glance at the wrong moment. Beauty became evidence, liner became proof, a pleasant voice was testimony, and for the poor there was no such thing as innocent beauty. If a peasant girl caught the eye of a nobleman, she was blamed. If she refused him, she was accused. If she accepted him, she was ruined. Some women leaned into it. They wore the bright rouge, the heavy eyes, the slit bodices and loud laughter. They danced on feast days, lifted their skirts, cursed like men. They were branded whores, but at least they chose it. At least they weren't pretending. Others tried to play it safe, dressed plain, lowered their voices, avoided mirrors, scrubbed their faces raw to look modest. But modesty didn't protect them either, because in the end it wasn't about how you looked, it was about who saw you and what they wanted you to be. The same rouge that made a queen look divine could make a maid look dangerous. The same perfume that graced a noble lady's collar could condemn a village girl to the river. Beauty wasn't a gift, it was a weapon. Sometimes it saved you, most times it turned in your hand, and the worst part, it was never yours to begin with. The paint has dried, your face is stiff beneath the layers, powder, pigment, balm and ash. Your lips sting, your forehead aches, your eyes burn when you blink. But no one notices. They only see the glow, the flush on your cheeks that hides the bruises, the white of your skin that hides the fever, the softness of your mouth that hides the silence you've been taught to keep. You stand before the mirror again, just as you did that morning. The same cracked glass, the same flickering light. But something is missing. You. What stares back isn't a girl anymore. It's a mask, a display, a promise made to people who will never ask you if it hurts. Outside, the hall is filling with voices, men toasting, women whispering. Someone is already drunk. Someone else is laughing too loud. And your name is being called. You adjust the edge of your veil. Check the rouge one last time. Run your fingers along the line of your jaw where the blade nicked you last week. Then you do what every beautiful woman has always done. You smile and you step into the light. Because beauty isn't about being seen. It's about being accepted, not loved, not admired, permitted. And for that you would bleed again. You'd bleach your skin until it cracked. You'd pluck every hair until the scalp wept. You'd sip the bitter teas, wear the iron around your neck, sleep with the herbs sewn into your hem. You'd do it all again. Because the mirror never asked if you were ready. It only asked if you were enough. And that question echoes, from the courts of queens to the fires where witches screamed, from the quiet bedrooms where girls learned how to lie with their eyes, from the empty perfume bottles, the poisoned face creams, the blood-soaked cloths. It echoes through time. It echoes even now. Because the rituals may have changed, but the pressure has not. The idea that you must suffer to be seen, the belief that your body must be curated, corrected, purified, the lie that beauty comes with a crown when it's always come with a cage. And yet, you stand, stained lips, hollow cheeks, scalded skin, still standing, still seen, not because the rituals made you powerful, but because you endured them. You endured the fire beneath the powder, the blade behind the blush, the silence beneath the smile, and you're still here. That is what they never counted on, that behind every painted face was a person, a girl who bled, a woman who burned, a mirror that didn't break even when she did. They called it beauty. You called it survival.